The story of the Marauders has always stood out as one of the most captivating narratives in the Harry Potter series. A powerful tale of four unforgettable friends: James Potter, Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and Remus Lupin. Together they shaped an era at Hogwarts in the 1970s, leaving behind a legacy of adventure, loyalty, and ultimately, tragedy. Although the films only scratched the surface of their story, leaving us wanting more today, I'll take you through their journey, from their first days at Hogwarts all the way to each of their eventual fates. Let's begin with Remus Lupin. As a child, Remus was bitten by a werewolf named Fenrir Greyback, who happened to be one of Voldemort's followers. Because of his condition, Remus and his family believed that attending Hogwarts would be impossible. Most parents wouldn't want their children exposed to a werewolf. But when Albus Dumbledore became headmaster, he offered a solution. Understanding Remus's situation and feeling sympathetic toward him, Dumbledore suggested taking specific precautions so that Remus could join Hogwarts without posing a risk to others. Remus received his acceptance letter at 11 and arrived at Hogwarts for his first year. Meanwhile, James Potter and Sirius Black were meeting for the first time on the Hogwarts Express. They shared a compartment with a girl named Lily Evans and a boy named Severus Snape. During the ride, James overheard Snape express his hope of joining Slytherin, to which James replied, "Who'd want to be in Slytherin? I'd rather leave than be in that house, wouldn't you?" The question was directed at Sirius, who responded that his whole family had been in Slytherin. After a moment of thought, he added, "Maybe I'll break the tradition myself." When James mentioned his preference for Gryffindor, Snape scoffed, already sparking some rivalry between the boys. As for Remus, he crossed paths with a shy, awkward boy named Peter Pettigrew. Taking Peter under his wing, Remus soon found himself part of a tight-knit group. Once sorted into Gryffindor, James got his wish, and Sirius broke away from his family's expectations. The four boys were brought together by their shared house, and together they became inseparable. To keep Remus and the other students safe, Dumbledore made special arrangements. He had a shack constructed on the outskirts of Hogsmeade and planted a formidable tree, the Whomping Willow, at the entrance of a tunnel connecting the tree to the shack. This tunnel allowed Remus to transform in isolation during full moons, ensuring his safety and that of his classmates. Each month, when the full moon rose, Remus would retreat through the hidden tunnel beneath the Whomping Willow, where he'd undergo his painful transformation in the secluded shack. Locals would come to know this eerie place as the Shrieking Shack because of the unsettling screams and howls that echoed from within. The villagers believed it was haunted by restless spirits, never realizing the sounds were actually from Remus in his werewolf form. Dumbledore subtly encouraged these ghostly rumors, recognizing that fear would keep the curious at a distance, protecting Remus's secret. The monthly transformations were an ordeal for Remus, not only because of the isolation, but due to the agony of his metamorphosis. With no one around, he was forced to turn his fury on himself, bearing the physical scars as reminders of his condition. Despite his suffering, the bond he shared with his three friends remained unbreakable. Remus, known for his wit and occasional restraint, tried to keep the group grounded, though he didn't always succeed. Then there was Sirius, the charmer of the group with his striking looks and the attention of many admiring eyes, though he hardly seemed to care. James, a Quidditch prodigy with a touch of swagger, never missed a chance to display his skill. His trademark habit of ruffling his hair gave him a just-off-the-broom look, adding to his effortless confidence. With a golden snitch in hand, he'd often perform small tricks, releasing it for a moment before catching it again to impress anyone who happened to be watching. And lastly, there was Peter, a slower, quieter presence who trailed his friends with loyalty, eager to be included in the group's adventures. Professor McGonagall once remarked that Peter was a foolish boy who idolized his friends to a fault. Lacking any particular talents of his own, Peter often gravitated toward stronger personalities, relying on others to provide him with a sense of security, a tendency that would later shape his life in unexpected ways. Meanwhile, as each month passed, James, Sirius, and Peter couldn't help but notice Remus's mysterious absences. Remus would offer all sorts of explanations, like needing to visit his ailing mother, fearing that his friends might abandon him if they ever learned the truth. The transformations, though painful, were just a part of his life, one that he'd hidden for years. But beyond those difficult nights, Remus felt happiness he had never experienced before, for he had true friends. By their second year, however, his friends began piecing together the real reason behind his disappearances. To Remus's surprise and relief, their reaction wasn't one of fear or rejection. Instead, they decided to do something extraordinary. They resolved to become animagi, magical shapeshifters, so they could join Remus during his transformations. For 3 years, the boys dedicated themselves to mastering this complex magic. By their 5th year, they succeeded, each one learning to take on the form of a different animal. The transformation opened a new world for them. Since, as Remus said, a werewolf is only a danger to people, meaning a werewolf posed a threat only to humans, they could safely accompany Remus in their animal forms. James took on the form of a stag, Sirius transformed into a large black dog, and Peter became a rat. When night fell, they would slip out from the castle grounds under the cover of James's invisibility cloak, transforming once they were safely outside. And since Peter was the smallest of the group, he had the job of slipping beneath the whomping willow's swinging branches to press the knot that froze the tree, allowing them safe passage. The 4 friends would then descend into the tunnel, where they joined Remus each month during his transformation. Over time, they adopted unique nicknames for one another. Sirius became Padfoot, Peter was Wormtail, James took the name Prongs, and Remus was known as Moony. Together, they proudly dubbed themselves the Marauders. In the company of his friends, Remus's transformations seemed a bit more bearable. While his body still changed, he found that his mind was calmer, his instincts less intense. As their confidence grew, the friends began to venture beyond the Shrieking Shack, exploring the Hogwarts grounds and even the village of Hogsmeade under the light of the full moon. Thanks to their animagus forms, James and Sirius, being larger animals, could often help keep Remus in check during his wolf form. There were close calls, moments when Remus nearly lost control, but these were always recounted later with laughter. Their nightly escapades granted them an unrivaled knowledge of Hogwarts and its surroundings, which led them to create the Marauders map. With a flourish, they inscribed the map with their nicknames, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, and it became their masterpiece, showing not only the school grounds, but also the whereabouts of every individual within its walls in real time. The map even revealed hidden passages leading in and out of the castle, paths known only to them. To access its secrets, one needed only to say, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," and to hide them again, mischief managed. Throughout their years at Hogwarts, the rivalry between the Marauders and Severus Snape was always simmering. Sorted into Slytherin, Snape was naturally at odds with him, and house loyalties only intensified the tension. But the boys took things a step further. One day, Sirius, in his usual mischievous way, told Severus Snape, who had been increasingly curious about Remus's mysterious absences, exactly how to get past the Whomping Willow to find out for himself and see what Remus was hiding. Sirius, ever the troublemaker, thought it would be amusing to see Snape stumble upon the truth, but when James caught wind of what Sirius had done, he immediately went after Snape. With a sense of urgency, James grabbed Snape, putting himself in great personal danger. In a split-second decision, he saved Snape from an almost certain death by Remus, who, in his werewolf form, would have undoubtedly torn Snape apart. Snape had seen the end of the hidden tunnel, and there was no turning back from what he had discovered about Remus's secret. It was a dangerous move, and Dumbledore made it clear to Snape that he was forbidden to tell anyone about Remus's condition. Meanwhile, James had begun to take an interest in Lily Evans, the fiery redhead muggle-born he'd met on the train. Every time he saw her, he couldn't help but ruffle his hair in that trademark way, as though he was somehow more charming because of it. To impress her, he would show off with his snitch, and even pick on others in hopes to get her attention. But none of his antics seemed to work. His efforts were met with little more than eye rolls from Lily, who wasn't easily won over by his showboating. In their 5th year, Remus was appointed as a Gryffindor prefect. Despite his position, he frequently turned a blind eye to the mischief his friends got up to, letting them slip by with more than they should have. Deep down, however, he began to feel the weight of his own choices. He never truly intervened when James and Sirius bullied Snape and others, and he would later regret not stepping in to stop it, wishing he had acted sooner to prevent the harm they caused. One day, after they finished their OWLs, the boys sat by the lake, teasing Peter for not answering a question on identifying signs of a werewolf. "How thick are you, Wormtail? You run with a werewolf every month," James laughed, nudging Peter with a grin. Sirius, clearly bored, sighed, and leaned back against the grass. "I wish it was a full moon tonight," he muttered, a glint of mischief in his eyes. As usual, James couldn't resist showing off when he spotted Lily nearby. With a quick ruffle of his hair and a flash of his snitch, he tried once again to get her attention, but Lily wasn't easily impressed. James, with a mischievous grin, pointed out Snape to Sirius. Without a moment's hesitation, both of them stood up, leaving Remus and Peter still sitting by the lake. With a practiced flick of their wands, they disarmed Snape and knocked him to the ground, sending his books scattering. "How'd the exam go, Snively?" James taunted, smirking. "I was watching him. His nose was practically glued to the parchment. There'll be grease marks all over it. They won't be able to read a word." Snape, furious, cursed at them. James retaliated, casting a spell that caused pink bubbles to fill Snape's mouth, making him splutter. Just then, Lily approached, telling them to stop. James, hoping to charm her, offered to leave Snape alone if she would go out with him. Lily shot him down instantly, saying she'd rather date the squid in the lake. In a heated moment, Snape insulted Lily by calling her a mudblood. James demanded he apologize, but Lily dismissed him, saying he was no better than Snape and that his behavior disgusted her. She then turned and walked away, leaving James fuming. "What is it with her?" he muttered, frustrated. Sirius, smirking, said, "Reading between the lines, mate, I'd say she thinks you're a bit conceited." Enraged, James turned back to Snape, continuing his harassment. "Who wants to see me take off Snively's trousers?" he taunted, prepared to humiliate him further. That summer, things took a turn for Sirius. He'd finally had enough of his family and their toxic obsession with blood purity. The Blacks, a family steeped in tradition and arrogance, had always believed that being a Black made them untouchable, even royal in their own right. The constant pressure to live up to the family's expectations had driven Sirius to his breaking point. So he ran away. And where did he go? To James's house, of course. Sirius, with his usual rebellious streak, had been welcomed there for years, and he found solace in the warmth of the Potter household. He would later tell Harry, with a fond grin, "Your grandparents were really good about it. They sort of adopted me as a second son." It wasn't just a one-time visit. Sirius found himself spending his school holidays at the Potters, becoming even closer to James than he already was. The bond between them deepened, almost as if they were brothers, truly family. And when Sirius turned 17, making him an adult in the wizarding world, he was able to move out and get a place of his own, thanks to a bit of fortune from his uncle's will. He no longer needed to rely on the Potters, but he never really left. James and Sirius were inseparable, as close as any brothers could be. By their 7th year at Hogwarts, the boys had matured. They no longer took pleasure in tormenting others. Well, mostly. Mischief still called to them, and they couldn't resist hexing Snape whenever the opportunity arose, though Snape was always quick to retaliate. Over the course of the year, Lily began to notice the changes in James and the others. The boy with messy hair had evolved into someone more mature and thoughtful. By the end of their 7th year, Lily's feelings for James had shifted, gradually but unmistakably. They started dating, much to the surprise of many, including their friends. James had matured more than anyone, earning the title of head boy, an especially meaningful achievement since he had never been a prefect. The Marauders finished their 7 years at Hogwarts, Sirius, James, and Remus with top marks, while Peter barely scraped by. After graduation, the 4 of them, along with Lily, joined the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's secret resistance group that fought against Voldemort and his Death Eaters. It was during this time that they found themselves on dangerous missions, working together to defeat the forces of darkness. In a short prequel story Rowling penned in 2008, Sirius and James found themselves in an unexpected chase. Sirius had borrowed his famous flying motorcycle, though this time they weren't flying. They were riding on the ground. The pair was being pursued by Muggle police trying to book them for speeding and not wearing helmets. They turned into an alley, thinking they had outsmarted the cops, but to their surprise, 3 wizards on broomsticks came soaring down toward them. Using magic, James and Sirius levitated the police car, sending it flying into the air, while the 3 wizards collided with the car in midair. With the Muggle police stunned, the 2 friends escaped, but the question remained, who had been chasing them? A logical guess was that it was Death Eaters. The 4 of them were already entrenched in the fight against Voldemort's forces, and it wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that they were being hunted as part of a mission for the Order. As time passed, James and Lily eventually got married, with Sirius standing proudly by James as his best man. Not long after, they had a son, Harry James Potter. Sirius was honored to be named Harry's godfather, a position he cherished deeply. The 4 friends, James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter, remained close, their bond strengthened by their shared commitment to the Order of the Phoenix. However, Peter Pettigrew, the once loyal friend, began to slip away from the Order. He started giving information to Voldemort, seeing no reason to oppose him any longer. Once again, Peter hid behind the shadows, convinced that aligning himself with the Dark Lord was his safest bet. His betrayal, though, would not remain secret for long. As time passed, the Marauders began to realize that someone close to them was feeding information to Voldemort. When Dumbledore learned that Voldemort had heard a prophecy potentially concerning Harry, he advised the Potters to assign a secret keeper to protect their location. With this spell, only the secret keeper could reveal their whereabouts, making it impossible for anyone else to betray them. Even if they tried, it would be physically impossible. Originally, Sirius was to be the secret keeper, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it was too obvious, too predictable. Remus, unfortunately, was away on a mission in the northern part of the country. In the end, they chose Peter Pettigrew, someone they believed too inconspicuous to be suspected. They thought Voldemort would never expect Peter, a weak, easily overlooked figure, to be the secret keeper. But in hindsight, it was clear that this was a terrible decision, because Peter, unbeknownst to the others, had already pledged himself to Voldemort. After the switch, only a handful of people knew the new plan: Lily, James, Sirius, and Peter. The rest of the Order, including Dumbledore and Remus, remained unaware, still believing Sirius was the secret keeper. And as history would tragically prove, Peter Pettigrew wasn't loyal. The moment he became secret keeper, he betrayed the Potters. Revealing their location to Voldemort, and on Halloween night in 1981, Voldemort attacked the Potter household. He murdered Lily and James, leaving their infant son, Harry, an orphan. When Sirius arrived at Peter's hiding place later that night, he found it empty. No sign of struggle. His heart sank. In a state of panic, he took off on his famous motorbike, heading straight for the Potter house. Upon arrival, he found the horrific truth. Lily and James were dead, their bodies lying cold on the floor. It was a scene no one could have prepared for. Hagrid was already there, having been sent by Dumbledore to retrieve Harry and take him to his aunt and uncle's house. Hagrid described Sirius as looking white and shaken. The half-giant tried to comfort him, but it was clear that Sirius was devastated. Sirius begged Hagrid to let him take Harry. After all, he was his godfather. But Dumbledore had made his plans, and he still believed that Sirius was the secret keeper. He thought that it was Sirius who had betrayed James and Lily. Hagrid, following Dumbledore's orders, refused Sirius's request, explaining that he had to take Harry to the Dursleys. Sirius, desperate and heartbroken, knew there was no time to waste. He gave Hagrid his motorbike, asking him to use it to get Harry to safety, knowing that he would no longer need it. Then, in his rage and grief, Sirius set out to track down Peter. It didn't take long before he cornered Peter in a narrow, muggle-filled street. The confrontation was brutal. Peter, cornered and terrified, made a desperate move. He cast a spell that created a massive explosion, killing 12 muggles in the process. In the chaos, Peter severed his own finger, transformed into his animagus form, a rat, and fled, leaving behind the finger as the only evidence of his presence. The scene left a bloody trail, with 12 dead muggles and the severed finger as the only trace of Peter. And Sirius, standing in the midst of it all, was framed for a brutal murder. It looked as though he had killed 13 people in cold blood. As the rumors spread, people would say, Black was vicious. He didn't just kill Pettigrew, he destroyed him. There was nothing left but a finger. Sirius was arrested and sentenced to life in Azkaban, imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. No one believed his story. Everyone thought he was the secret keeper and that he's the one who had betrayed James and Lily. The truth was buried, and the world would be left in the dark for years as Sirius sat in that dark, soul-crushing prison, knowing that Peter had escaped, and he was the one who had been left to suffer. During his years in prison, Sirius Black was uniquely unaffected by the Dementors, the soul-sucking guards of Azkaban who drove most prisoners to madness or despair. While they fed off the fear and hopelessness of their captives, Sirius was able to resist their influence. He wasn't immune, but he was driven by a singular focus, his innocence. His obsession with clearing his name, with proving that he hadn't betrayed his best friends, kept him grounded. He would often reflect on the day he was wrongfully imprisoned, allowing his mind to remain sharp and focused, clinging to that one solitary thought, his innocence. This obsession, he claimed, was not a happy thought, but it was a thought that kept the darkness at bay. Another factor that helped him maintain his sanity was his ability to shift into his animagus form. Since the Dementors have difficulty sensing the emotions of animals, Sirius transformed into his dog form when he could, allowing him to escape the crushing effects of the Dementors' presence. His animagus form also gave him a sense of freedom, albeit brief, and allowed him to exercise some control over his otherwise powerless existence in the prison. Meanwhile, Remus Lupin, who had always been a dear friend to Sirius, struggled with his own demons. Though he was free, his life was far from easy. Remus, a werewolf, was continually rejected from jobs due to his condition. Employers feared him, and the stigma of being a werewolf made it difficult for him to find steady work. He took menial, low-paying jobs that were far below his skill level. Over time, he fell into poverty, feeling increasingly isolated. He had lost two of his closest friends, James and Lily, and was left with the belief that Sirius had betrayed them all. This left Remus feeling abandoned, with no one left to turn to. Peter Pettigrew, The traitor had his own fears to contend with. After betraying the Potters to Voldemort, he went into hiding, fearing for his life. While the Death Eaters had once been his allies, Peter knew that they would now view him as a liability. Voldemort's defeat had been made possible by the information Peter had provided, and the Death Eaters, once loyal to their Dark Lord, now turned their anger toward Peter for his role in Voldemort's downfall. He stayed hidden, keeping to his rat form and remaining undetected for years. He was eventually adopted by the Weasley family, who didn't know the truth about their pet rat, Scabbers. The rat's true identity remained hidden, and Peter lived in fear, constantly listening for any news that might signal Voldemort's return. In the Weasley household, Scabbers, as he was now called, lived a relatively quiet life, becoming a fixture in the family, particularly in the life of Percy Weasley and later Ron. Peter's choice to remain with a wizarding family allowed him to keep track of news from the wizarding world. More importantly, it gave him the opportunity to listen for any signs of Voldemort's resurrection, which he feared would one day come. 12 years after the tragic deaths of Lily and James Potter, Remus Lupin finally found a steady job at Hogwarts as the defense against the dark arts teacher. Dumbledore, ever the supporter of his friends, had tracked Remus down that summer and offered him the position. It was a new chapter for Remus, who had struggled with poverty and isolation for so long. He was finally able to return to a place that held so many fond memories, though it also reminded him of the ones he had lost. That same summer, Sirius Black made a daring escape from Azkaban, becoming the first ever prisoner to break free from the high-security wizarding prison. He managed to slip past the Dementors by transforming into his animagus form, a dog, allowing him to move undetected through the prison and out into the world. His escape was prompted by a realization. He had seen a picture of the Weasley family in the Daily Prophet, and there, hidden in the background, was Peter Pettigrew, or Scabbers, as he was now known. The rat was missing a toe, just as Peter had lost a finger when he faked his death years earlier. This discovery led Sirius to believe that Peter was still alive, the traitor who had betrayed Lily and James. Peter, still in his rat form, began to grow increasingly ill. He lost weight, and his paranoia grew as he feared that Sirius would come after him now that he had escaped. His anxiety became so intense that it affected his health, but his fear of being exposed was stronger than any physical ailment. Meanwhile, the wizarding world still believed that Sirius was a dangerous dark wizard, faithful to Voldemort. As a result, everyone remained on edge, fearing for Harry's safety now that Sirius was free. Despite this, Sirius's primary goal was not harm, but to find Peter and bring him to justice for the murder of his friends. Sirius eventually made his way to Hogwarts, where the students, including Harry, Ron, and Hermione, were still unaware of the truth. Crookshanks, Hermione's cat, played an unexpected role in helping Sirius find Peter. The cat had shown an unusual dislike for Scabbers and helped Sirius locate him, and even gave him the Gryffindor Tower password. Crookshanks's behavior had been a critical clue in the unraveling of the mystery. Despite Crookshanks's attempts to kill Peter and the fact that Sirius was able to track him, the cat's intervention failed. It wasn't until later that the truth would come out in the Shrieking Shack. One night, the three remaining Marauders, Sirius, Remus, and Peter, finally had their reunion when Remus saw Peter Pettigrew on the Marauders map, along with Sirius, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, who had been following the trail of clues. They all met in the shrieking shack, where the truth would finally be uncovered. Remus confronted Peter, his voice shaking with rage. "You sold James and Lily to Voldemort, didn't you?" Peter pleaded, a cowardly tone in his voice. "I didn't mean to. What would you have done?" Sirius replies fiercely, shouting, "I would have died. I would have died rather than betray my friends." Remus and Sirius, enraged, nearly decide to kill Peter, but Harry intervened, stopping them from taking action. Later, Sirius acknowledged Harry's decision, recognizing the nobility in his actions, though he still believed Peter didn't deserve mercy, to which Harry replied that he didn't think his dad, James, would have wanted his two best friends to become killers. Sirius gazed at Harry. It struck him just how much the boy resembled his father, James, and how much his eyes were unmistakably like Lily's. Sirius then offered Harry a chance for a new beginning, telling Harry that he could live with him when his name is cleared. But their reunion was short-lived. As they were about to take action against Peter, Lupin's transformation into a werewolf interrupted their plans. The chaos of the situation led to Sirius being captured by the Dementors, and Peter, in his rat form, managed to escape once again. Despite the grave setbacks, Harry and Hermione made a daring rescue attempt, freeing Sirius from the grip of the Dementors. However, Sirius, unable to clear his name after Peter's escape, was forced to go into hiding once more. The battle for justice was far from over, and the truth about his innocence remained just out of reach. Meanwhile, Remus Lupin found himself in a difficult position. His secret as a werewolf had become known, and when parents began sending angry letters to Dumbledore concerned about the safety of their children, Lupin made the difficult decision to resign as defense against the dark arts teacher. He didn't want to jeopardize the safety of his students, but the weight of being publicly outed as a werewolf took its toll. Peter Pettigrew, however, still in service to Voldemort, went on a mission to find his master. After a long search, he finally found Voldemort in his weakened, disembodied state. In a desperate act to restore his master, Peter sacrificed his own hand, using his blood to give Voldemort a new body. The scream of pain echoed through the room as Voldemort's form began to take shape. As a reward for his loyalty, Voldemort gave Peter a new hand, stronger and more powerful than the one he had lost, symbolizing the bond between master and servant. As the Second Wizarding War loomed on the horizon, Remus and Sirius both rejoined the Order of the Phoenix, this time facing the full force of Voldemort's followers. In one particularly chaotic mission to protect Harry and his friends, tragedy struck. In the midst of the fight, Bellatrix Lestrange, Sirius's cousin, killed him, and he fell in battle. Remus, devastated by the loss of his closest friend, held Harry back, sharing the same heartbreak, but unable to show it. He had to stay strong, not just for himself, but for Harry, who had now lost his mother, father, and godfather. The war continued, and Peter remained under Voldemort's control, his hand growing more powerful with each passing day. During this time, Remus found unexpected happiness in his relationship with Nymphadora Tonks, a fellow member of the Order. Their love grew despite the challenges they faced, particularly Remus's fear of being an outcast due to his condition. He worried that his being a werewolf would put Tonks at risk, and that their child might inherit his curse. Remus's insecurities led him to push Tonks away, and he briefly ran from the responsibility of being a husband and father. While Harry, Ron, and Hermione were off on their mission to destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes, Remus met with them at number 12 Grimmauld Place. He expressed his fears about his son being born a werewolf, and his guilt over Tonks being forced to deal with the stigma of their marriage. In a heated conversation, Harry called Remus a coward for abandoning his family, reminding him that he needed to be there for Tonks and their child. Furious and ashamed, Remus left, but Harry's words stuck with him. Eventually, Remus realized that Harry was right. He reconciled with Tonks, and the two of them awaited the birth of their son, whom they named Teddy. Remus had found the family he had longed for, and he was determined to be the father that Teddy needed, despite the ongoing war. As the war drew closer to its final battles, Harry, Ron, and Hermione's journey to find the Horcruxes led them to Malfoy Manor, where they were captured by the Death Eaters. Among their captors was Peter Pettigrew, who had become even more twisted with time. When Harry and Ron wrestled Peter's wand from him, the rat-like traitor began to choke Harry with his powerful silver hand, a replacement given to him by Voldemort himself. Harry, struggling for breath, looked at Peter. "You're going to kill me after I saved your life?" Harry's voice rang out, raw with emotion. "You owe me, Wormtail." Peter froze. His eyes widened in terror, and then his own hand, under the control of his twisted loyalty to Voldemort, began to strangle him. Harry, desperate, tried to stop the self-inflicted attack, but Peter's hand had a mind of its own. His purple face contorted in pain as he struggled. His eyes rolled back in his head, and with one last desperate twitch, Wormtail died, in the very same way he had lived, controlled by fear and guilt, a twisted and fitting punishment for his betrayal. The battle raged on, and Remus Lupin, the last of the Marauders, continued to fight. But the war was not kind. In the final battle at Hogwarts, Remus faced off against Dolohov, one of Voldemort's most ruthless followers. The two fought fiercely, but in the end, it was Dolohov's curse that struck Remus down. His death marked the tragic end of the Marauders. In the quiet aftermath of the final battle, as Harry stood alone in the Forbidden Forest, preparing to face his fate, something extraordinary happened. With the resurrection stone in his hand, Harry called upon the spirits of those he had lost, the people who had shaped his life, given him hope, and loved him unconditionally. To his amazement, 3 of the 4 Marauders appeared before him: James, Sirius, and Remus. Harry, with a heavy heart, sought reassurance about the journey he was about to face, wondering if dying was painful. Sirius answered gently, easing Harry's fears, describing it as peaceful as falling asleep. Burdened with guilt, Harry expressed sorrow for their sacrifices, never having wanted them to give their lives for him. Turning to Remus, Harry mentioned his son, feeling the weight of the life Remus left behind. Remus, however, assured him that his son would one day understand the courage and cause his parents had stood for. With his father's comforting words promising to stay with him until the end, Harry felt the strength to face what lay ahead. James, Sirius, and Remus, each a father figure to Harry in his own way, stand by him one last time, guiding him toward his fate. In this final act, the Marauders offer their love and courage to the boy who carried their legacy. As they watch over him, bound to him by loyalty and love until the very end. And this, my friends, was the incredible story of the Marauders, an absolutely fascinating tale. Their friendship, mischief, and sacrifice shaped so many narratives and aspects of the wizarding world we know today. It definitely deserves its own film, don't you think? I really enjoyed delving into this story, and I hope you did too. If there's something you'd love me to explore in the future, let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to hear your ideas. And of course, if you liked this video, please give it a like, and maybe subscribe to Fiction Files too. We're only just getting started. There's so much more to uncover on this journey. But until then, all I have to say is, mischief managed.